my god! I just realized what that lockpick was.
It took a minute, and then you're like, "Oh man!"
Like, I still had it up on my screen, and I was like, okay, PETEY posted this. There's a joke here. I've got to figure it out before we start the show.
Oh, you don't have that epiphany in the middle of the show,
right? Exactly.
We're not. It's like where we don't like. It's like, well, I thought the chiptunes were really dynamic and they worked really well. Oh my god, it's an anus. Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome once again to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers. I really like this hat. And I'm PETEY Rave, your man with no plan. Here with me is, of course, my team of record viewers. We got none other than Patrick.
Hi.
We've got Drew.
Hi.
And we've got Brett.
Hi.
We are here, of course, gathered once again to talk about music. The provider of the music this week is none other than Brett. Brett, what do you got for us this week?
I brought an album from a music producer named Rolemusic. The album is a theme album called The Pirate and the Dancer.
What expectations, I'll go to Drew. What expectations did you have coming into this album?
Well, when we first got this album, we were talking in a Root Me chat about when we were going to record and how we were going to fix some things up and what albums we were going to be listening to for the recording. And Brett said, guys, I've picked mine. This is it. Here's a link to a SoundCloud. Oh, God. Trust me on this one. So my impressions were slightly worried at first. But I got to the SoundCloud. I heard a couple of chiptunes coming from the player. I promptly stopped that player, downloaded the album I was supposed to be listening to, and went into it that way.
Patrick, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
So I'm going to start with when I got to this guy's website to download it, and I see 4 letters that otherwise strung together wouldn't matter, but they do in this case, LSDJ, which is a little cart you can buy for a Game Boy that basically functions as a tracker for the sound chip inside. I had a friend with one. You can make musics with your car alarm that makes music. So with a Game Boy, I had a friend who had one. It was kind of nifty, and I occasionally like chiptunes, but I've never been super into like the strictly I'm going to make this only with an NES or a Game Boy and have nothing else in it. So that was a little bit worrying to me, but I figured, I don't dislike chiptunes. There's probably something good here.
Brett, how would you describe this album thematically? What are the themes and elements that make this key?
All right, so the only reason I know this album is because it has a distinct sound to it. I first heard Rolemusic after seeing a video of Jeff Gerstmann of Giant Bomb being drawn to one of these songs. He was being drawn as Dr. Tracksuit versus Mr. Worldwide. But after 12 hours of sleuthing around for a chiptune, which, mind you, is very difficult because all you have is it sounds like this noise, and try Google that noise. It's not very easy. But I knew that there was a bit of like the way that the songs were composed. You could tell somebody had like likely formal training in music composition because there's definitely different voicings. With the sound of things, there's also a bit of Latin flair to it. Later found out that the guy is from Spain. And there's a very definite melody or that is played that sounds like it's a guitar piece. It sounds like somebody is writing guitar solos, guitar music. It's not like piano music. It's not like it sounds very much from a guitar player, like something for a guitarist. And this album has a lot of that. Now, this is a theme album. This album is one that he did do with the Gameboy sound chip in LSDJ. He does do things on the ZX Spectrum and the Famicom and other type stuff, but this has a very definite Gameboy sound to it, and it is made to have Caribbean sounds while still being very poppy and chiptuney. It sounds like something that would be in a video game, but it has a flavor to it that is way different than anything I had heard before.
Which is funny because, like, if some of those Super Mario 1 tracks do have a Caribbean flavor if you listen to a few of them themselves, so it's possible. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting sound. Drew, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention?
Well, when I first found out that this was going to be chiptunes, I was like, okay. I was prepared to sort of evaluate it as one of two things. Usually in chiptunes, you get a guy that does I'm going to make it sound like an old school video game sort of deal. Like, I want to make this reminiscent of like Mario or Mega Man or something like that. Or you get something like, say, like a Crash Faster, where it's like they use normal DJ equipment and then they augment that with a Game Boy or an NES, something like that. This actually falls into like the sort of offshoots, and I was really happy about that because it never sounded like either of those things to me. You can tell, like Brett said, that this guy has a bit of formal training behind him because it was very layered in a way that this guy knew what he was doing with composition. And that was really cool. It ranged from like dancey sort of poppy tracks that had a couple of rock tracks in it. Like, it had a lot of, it's called, it's literally The Pirate and the Dancer. So it's going to have a little bit of a piratey feel to it, which I think is kind of cool. So that was all well and good. It used the sort of gimmick of the video game noises, but it didn't dwell on that. It didn't let that be the be all and all of what this was, which I think was really cool. It'd be really kind of neat. We're going to get into the band I'm going to pick for next week, but there's a band I've been listening to that actually went the opposite way. But I would like to see this gone where this was made on a Game Boy, give it to regular instruments and see what you can do there with the composition that you made. And I think it would work just as well. And I think it would be just as intriguing.
Talk to me in a couple of weeks. There may be something going on in my daily life.
Yeah.
Good plan then, sir.
Yes. Patrick, what would be the themes and elements that caught your attention?
So there's some things, my whole, I don't want to call it beef because I don't dislike, LSDJ and using a traditional Game Boy or NES. I actually think it's kind of rad, and it's really, really, really difficult. I've messed with LSDJ just long enough to know I am not that talented, and I will never be good at it. But it has a very limited dynamic and frequency range, and that you have to be okay with this kind of very narrow sound because that's just all the chip can do. I mean, this, the chip in most digital watches today is probably as powerful as a sound chip in a Game Boy. Yeah. Drew's Moto 360 could walk a Game Boy, like in terms of horsepower, like it is. Yeah. And it fits on his wrist, but this guy has a really, really good take on the genre because he isn't trying to make stuff that sounds like it doesn't sound like it came out of a video game mostly. I mean, it does because it sounds like playing my, Kirby's Dream Land on my, Game Boy when I was a kid. But he didn't make anything like, he's not pulling themes and stuff that exist. He's making genuinely original music and doing it fairly well. Like it's good. It's well constructed. Some of the songs are really good. The album does have kind of a cohesive feel. which is nice. I kind of see the sort of the ebb and flow of it, and it works.
Brett, what would be some of the key tracks that caught your attention?
The thing that we do on this show, the opener, it's a very, very marchy track. And it harkens back to some old video game music, like your Zelda type, marching beat using that pseudo random noise. But it has a fresh sound that with the swells in it, and a really, really deftly written solo. Like it is, the solo in that is where I was like, okay, I hear this album, I hear somebody that knows how to play a guitar, possibly somebody that also knows how to play the backing, doing like fingerstyle or classical guitar. I have been in contact with this composer. There was a little bit of a language barrier, but he's pretty good at English. But I have yet to ask him because I kind of want the mystery to stand. Like, is this guy a guitar player? Because I think this was written by somebody who was a guitarist, possibly a classical guitarist. But he definitely knows a thing or two about writing guitar solos, because there are things that he did in this that were outside of the American rock and roll minor pentatonic blues that like just really blew me away. Like if somebody played that on a guitar, I was in the room, my head would be turning. Then you get like The Pirate and the Dancer. The song's great. It has a really good bass line and beat. And it's got a great hook. They use an arpeggiator really well. It's got some really, really fun stuff going on in it. And he plays the best beats. He plays me the best beats. Also has a really good beat and bass line. The melody is really good, and the great thing about this chip is everything has like equal attention. You can't just slough off on something. Like all the frequency ranges are there, or they build in like from the start to finish. They like open slowly with just a couple of voices and build up. But like there are a lot of songs on here that I can get into that like you can really feel like the hot triplet feel. Or like it sounds like something like a requinto would play in like Puerto Rican fusion. It's really fun to hear island music played in this way.
True. What would be some of the key tracks that caught your attention?
Well, let's talk about the first song real quick. Shipwreck in the Pacific Ocean. Started off the album really strong. The layers worked, I think, really, really well. And sort of got you into the musicality of what this album was going to be. It did use a bit of that techno little flavor that you get with chiptune sometimes, but it let the melody speak for itself. And it let the melody build before it got into that sort of, for lack of a better term, that Boots and Cats sort of feel, as we all know too well. And then I'm also going to talk about The Pirate and the Dancer, because I have a very strong opinion on when you name an album after a song, the song has to be able to stand really strongly on its own. This one does. And I think it does that very well. It's an 8-bit song that borders between it bounces between like a dance heavy track and almost a sea shanty sort of feel. Perfect for the title of the song, perfect for the title of the record. I think it worked really, really well. And then we get into Beach Wedding Dance. Y'all knew that you listen to this album, we weren't going to get away with not me talking about the song with the upstrokes in it. Let's be fair about this. There was some offbeat going on here. It, again, if what Brett alluded to is happening, may I also suggest that any live instrumentation includes maybe a horn or two, specifically on this song, because to me it was about as like a ska feeling to me as you can get without having a Jamaican in the back singing backup vocals on a keyboard. It was awesome. It was something that I really, really enjoyed, was not expecting, and I had a blast with the album from front to back.
Yeah. Patrick, what are the tracks that caught your attention? What tracks stood out for you?
Just to, retread on the things that have already been said. Shipwreck in the Pacific Ocean's pretty cool. It takes everything that a Game Boy can make, every sound it can, and uses it. It takes full advantage of it. Like Brett said at the beginning that this doesn't have a guy playing an instrument, but like to me, yes, it is not the same as playing guitar or a piano or anything, but like making music this way is just as hard and takes just as much skill. It's just a different set of skills, and I think it's an unfair way to characterize it as not calling it an instrument, because it makes sound. And it makes, cool sounds. And this guy is really good at it. I mean, he's got a great understanding of the capabilities of his instrument and how to make it sound cool. The Pirate and the Dancer. So at one point, I was messing around with trying to make chiptune music when I realized I'm a hack and I have no talent. And I have no idea how to use an arpeggiator. I don't understand it. I'm god awful at it. But this guy, Pirate and the Dancer, like that is some of the best use of it I've heard in a really long time. It's just a really cool song, and that sort of like perfect use of an arpeggiator sort of impressed me. And I think I'll include He Plays Me the Best Rhythms. And this is the only one where I felt like it felt video gamey, because it just had that shit just got real boss battle feel to it. where like if you're playing a game, especially something from that 8-bit era where you didn't have crazy realistic graphics, and sometimes the actual representation of things wasn't all that great. The music told you when shit got real, and that had that sort of vibe, and it was a fun song, and it had a good feeling to it that was sort of, shit's getting real.
Yeah, shit's about to get real. Shit's going down in clay class. And it's funny, the arpeggiator. You couldn't arpeggiate a diminished fifth of your philosophy degree depended on it. That's all I could think about.
PETEY, as the one who's closest to the islands, what do you have to say?
I have to say that it was just a lot of good. Like I can't expound on anything that hasn't already been said. It's just a lot of really good. I will say, for me, maybe there were moments that faded into the background sometimes, but that's fine. There was just a lot of good to be had on this album. A lot of good to be had on the tracks. Just what y'all said. Ditto. Let's go back around the horn. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts about the album overall?
My conclusive thoughts is exactly what Brett said up front, is everything that this album gives you. This guy obviously knows a thing or two about music theory, about composing music, about writing music, and he does it with a limited set of tools, right? You see some composers use lots of tools and meld them together really well. This guy uses few tools, one specifically, a chip inside of a Game Boy, and make something that has a lot of cool depth to it and never lets go of the sort of fun nature of what it is. And I think that can be commended very strongly. I think it was a fun record, and hell, it's free. Yes. Like, even if you don't like it as much as we do, it's free. So if you don't take the time to listen to a couple of free songs, you're wrong.
That's your problem. That's your, it's your bad. Yeah, it takes this guy one instrument in a half an hour to accomplish what takes a lot of people, a lot of instruments, and hours to not accomplish. And pretty much. Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts about the album overall?
I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the whole like pure LSDJ or pure, like Famitracker Ness, track Ness stuff. But I think because he chose to do styles of music outside of dance music, sort of did, more Caribbean feeling music and more something different and something I had not heard, executed on a chiptune sort of platform. It was interesting and it was cool, and it's one of those albums where it's fairly short It's not super deep, but I think you're rewarded for listening to it. It's enjoyable, and if you're not familiar with Chiptune, for the love of God, go listen to it, because you're missing out on something that is kind of cool.
Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts about the album overall?
To say what Drew said, just put the word admirable instead of whatever word he used. I admire this. It's commendable, but it is admirable. Like, this guy did some stuff, and not only did he put as much effort as you honestly know that he did, if you listen to this, he also released it under Creative Commons and doesn't expect to get anything out of it financially. But as somebody who has worked around musicians that are scraping for every dollar, this guy's just handing it out. Like, here you go, free music. Just tell people who I am, which people didn't, and it made it very hard for me to find this guy. But I have, at the end of the day, go check him out. He does other music, other styles of music. He does sound, so the ZX Spectrum, the NES stuff. He does crazy things it's things that I didn't know you could do with NES sound chip. It really blew me away. And if you really like it, send the guy an email. It's what I did. He responds. He appreciates it.
Yes.
You can actually reach this guy.
Yes. And that's awesome. All right, so those are our thoughts, and now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews. We sum everything up into a shitty poem. And let's go around the horn. Patrick, what is your haiku?
Oh, hello, Gameboy. Meet Mr. LSDJ. Make chippy toonies.
Drew, what is your haiku?
I was told to trust. Had to walk the plank. Luckily, the waters were nice.
I'll throw mine in. Quality chiptunes, even if they sometimes fade in the background. Brett, what is your haiku?
Imposed restrictions. Seems nothing held this guy back. A solid product.
And those are our thoughts on this album. You won't find this on Spotify, I don't believe, or on our Spotify playlist, but you can add it to your local music on Spotify because it's free. You can find it on SoundCloud. So, and it's on there. But on that Spotify playlist, theoretically, is the next album. The next week's album is provided by none other than Drew. Drew, what do you got for us next week?
Well, band I was handed to by a drummer friend of mine. He messaged me randomly out of the blue and said, "Dude, check this band out." I checked that band out. The band was brilliant. A little bit of a jazz rock collective out of Buffalo, New York. A band known as The Reign of Kindo. Their album will be... Should I forget the name?
That's a really cool album name.
Next week, should I forget the name?
Hold on.
Awesome.
That's an awesome album name.
Wow.
The album name being Play With Fire.
I think you just found your new plastic pants. What was the name of the album again? Let the people know.
Play With Fire.
Yes.
Okay.
I had it saved in a playlist of a bunch of ideas that I was listening to earlier. I completely forgot which album I was listening to.
Play With Fire, but not really. It's an album that you want to listen to. But that's for next week, and that's a fun discussion. I might even change my hat. But that's it for us this week. You can find us all over the internet. Patrick is at The Swagger. Brett is at Hibbity Beverage, HIBBI2IBIBBARD. Drew is at X. I'm at PETEY RAVE. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube. Subscribe, please. Subscribe, share, like, do all the things. iTunes, Stitcher, all the places. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Blip, 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 blip.
Ooh.